Episode 8 of Skeleton Crew is all finished, and I'm going to give you everything right here about the episode. And there were a few moments in particular that really stood out. The episode opens with Jod convincing everyone he is good. He's the emissary. He's a Jedi. He's commanding the droids. The parents are eating out of his hands. And no doubt the kids are seeing that lit lightsaber and going, remember, just a little while ago, he threatened to kill our families if we don't do what he says. Now, they don't know that it's really an empty threat. And that's one of the interesting things about this episode that we find out about Jod as it goes on. But he commands the kids and families to kind of go to house arrest. The parents are like, is that really necessary? But Jod is just trying to limit what they're going to say so they can't spill the problem, the truth, the reality that there's a pirate ship up there waiting to come down to take all this gold. And so Jod uses the droids, which he doesn't trust. We've seen that time and time again, but he's using them to his advantage as he's going to visit the supervisor. As Wim and his dad reheat a plate of leftovers, and his dad cracks a joke about home-cooked meals, but I don't think it's a joke. I think he's being serious. They have a little bit of an argument because Wim is trying to communicate his frustration and fear for what's going to happen, particularly because Fern and Farah are going with Jod to the supervisor's tower, not really because they want to, but because Jod insisted. This has made Wim feel anxious and worried, but he knows he can't do anything because these droids are watching him. And so he just kind of concedes in this argument around the dinner table as he's kind of thinking, you can see, well, it's good to be home. I'm thankful for being home. I don't want to make it a bigger deal, but there's clearly something stirring, and we're going to see about that. And this worry and concern continues as Wim tries to communicate with Neil, and the droid comes in like, what was that you were saying? He just tries to real quick pretend like he's playing with his action figures so that they don't suspect anything. And then we go with Jod. We're into the supervisor's tower, the place we've wanted to be this entire show. And it's not what we expect.
Hello?
Or is it? It's kind of the exact thing we all thought, that it's a droid running everything. But they give us a few other tidbits. We see these panels and kind of consoles where there clearly were people that would sit there at one point in time that would be in some way serving the supervisor, but they haven't been there for a long time, as Jod runs his hand over the back of one of the chairs, clearly seeing there's a big collection of dust. But as this whole interaction is happening, we realize that Fern's mom has been here before, that most likely she's seen the supervisor before. She's not taken back that it's a droid, whereas Jod is kind of like surprised. Oh man, great. And he joked about it last episode, like he can't wait to be done talking to droids, yet here comes the droid. And Jod tries to trick the droid, just like he has previously, to talk his way out of it by saying he's a Jedi, but the droid calls him out on it because he knows that he's lying.
Your other ship may land if you can clear up one tiny detail. You see, the last message from the Republic stated that all Jedi were traitors. So, which are you lying about? Being an emissary or a Jedi?
This is getting back to Order 66, which is a huge connection in this galaxy. It kind of gives us a little bit clearer perspective on the timetable, that it shows that the message by Emperor Palpatine out into the galaxy was kind of just shot everywhere, all throughout the whole entire galaxy, even to systems he wasn't sure about, which makes me wonder, what else does the supervisor know from communications from the outside that the others do not? At-Atin didn't exist before this show, so there isn't really a way to say that the Emperor knew or the Republic knew or anyone knew about this world, that it had to be a world that was lost, but this world knew some of what was happening out there, or at least the supervisor did, and maybe that's why the people were no longer used as workers in the supervisor's tower. Instead, he kind of just took over everything, made sure everything kept running the way it's supposed to over the decades and centuries that it's been. I know we all speculated that the supervisor could have been Captain Renaud, it could have been Wim's mom, it could have been this or that or anything else. And it really was just the plain old thing that we kind of thought it was, that everything was running on autopilot by a droid, that it's all been neat and kept that way. Now, it does make us wonder what those Easter eggs and things on at Akron were. Why was there a headless statue? Well, it was probably just there. There was nothing to it other than the aesthetics of it, which really kind of actually frustrates me. And I think is one of the things about this episode that was a little bit of a letdown, is that they did tease us. They did. I know you're going to say that we blew things out of proportion. By we, I mean content creators. You're probably right also. But when they're showing us things like this and giving us hints and hiding the face of Captain Renaud and giving us headless statues and sanctums that are a supervisor tower on another planet, and they're giving these things, but then they don't answer them. And I think it's a cop-out to say it would be answered in future seasons. I don't think that that's a good way to go about it. You break the trust of people when you build up these kind of storylines that don't lead really anywhere. And that was the letdown of this whole episode for me, even though I really enjoyed it. And there's some reasons why. We'll get to that in a bit. Once Jod realizes the jig is up, the plan has failed, he just stabs the supervisor in the eye. It dies, and clearly the only way that At-Aten would work is if the supervisor was really controlling everything, the power grid, the droids, all of it was a self-contained system, and so you kill the supervisor, and what ends up happening? It all shuts down. It is a little bit convenient, but I think you can make the case that it works in this sense, especially when we see that it is all supposed to be this well-oiled machine that runs on autopilot. So if you take out the head, it really does mess everything up. And that is the cue to Wim and the others that something is up, the power is out, but the droids also are down, so they are free to go. Now Jod wants to get his pirate ship through, and he wants to bring them through the barrier. So he pulls up this lever that supposedly can destroy the barrier, but instead of that, Farah helps him change the codes and make it so that like the red dotted barrier satellites turn green, allowing them to pass through the barrier, and the ship starts poking through the clouds. I felt like the Black Pearl in Pirates of the Caribbean, just kind of bum, 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 bum. That's my way of doing it so I don't get a copyright strike. That was pretty bad. And that gets me to one of the points. As I was watching this ship and the camera angles, I thought a lot of this episode looked fantastic. I think the cinematography and the lighting really shone well in this episode, particularly as you have all these citizens kind of looking up. They're seeing for the first time a ship that is like, what is this massive giant frigate doing in our skyline? And then all of a sudden, there's like this pause and moment, and it just starts shooting down into the ground, blowing stuff up, creating chaos, sending out ships into the communities. And now we see Wim's character kind of come to life. He's the bold one. He's the one that wants to go on the hero's adventure. He's the one who's strong and ready to take action, while his dad is kind of passively standing there going, well, no, the security droids can do it and you don't have to worry about it. Wim isn't alone. Neil and KB have already beat him to it. They're working on a plan. They have a plan ready to go to get a message out past the barrier. But the only way to do that is to get into the Onyx Cinder and fly out past the barrier to send a message to Kim, so Kim can send a message to the Republic and get the X-Wings to show up. It's actually a pretty good plan. And so they hop on the hover bikes and get going and zoom off as Wim's dad is left there kind of yelling, come back. He commandeers another vehicle, one of just the bystanders, the kids that they wanted to race early on. He takes his bike, and now we've got all four of them zooming off into the woods, finding cover, and we get this moment, this really awesome moment. I just kind of laughed because it was a cool way to show Wim's dad just breaking out of the matrix of his life that has just been this track that you get on, you go to work and home, and it's the same thing again and again and again and again and again. And they make this jump across the ravine, and Wim's dad is just like celebrating, loving life.
Dad, come on!
Like, he's the next racer for the races that they're going to have. And Wim's like, God, we got to go. Let's snap back. And they get to the Onyx Cinder and find out, wait a minute, we need power. That's stuck. It's held in place by these couplings that need power. So we have to make it to the Supervisor's tower. As all that's going down, Fern is trying to convince her mom to come alive in the same way, trying to convince her to say, hey, we need to take action. No one is going to save us from these pirates. We have to do it. We have to do something to make sure that we're safe. We're going to take the guns from these droids and shoot at Jod, and you got to make a diversion. They're trying to hatch a plan, not knowing that a plan is happening behind the scenes. And that gets us back to Wim and his dad. As they're getting ready to figure out how to restore power, we get this awesome moment where Wim's dad is now like emboldened.
Can you turn them on?
Son, you are talking to a level 7 systems coordinator. Get the bike.
He's ready to take action. He's learned from his son and he's excited. He's a level 7 supervisor's coordinator and he's going to turn on the power. And so now they're hatching a plan. They're headed to the tower. And that's where kind of everything starts to take a quick turn in this episode. Because they get there and Wim is now trying to distract Jod, telling him a story that he's really just taken from his hollow projections or whatever they are on his Kindle or his pad, his tablet, his iPad, whatever you want to call it. He's recounting those stories, making it up. Fern's trying to help him, all while his dad is sneaking behind the consoles, getting ready to flip the switch on to restore power so that the Onyx Cinder can fly off. And as that all happens, he's distracted long enough. Power goes on. Jod takes a shot at the dad, and everything kind of is tense as KB flies off into space. And Jod is like, why did you do that? You didn't have to do that. Now I have to do something I didn't want to do. I think there's still good in Jod after all. There's a tinge of light poking through all of the darkness as he regrets what he's about to do, which is sending his crew to go stop the Onyx Cinder before that message gets out. Well, they can't stop it. The message gets out to Kim, and Kim is going to call the New Republic on behalf of the kids. They've got the coordinates. A hyperspace lane is ready to go, but there's still one problem. The barrier is up. The Onyx Cinder comes crashing back down to Earth. The Onyx Cinder comes crashing back down to At-Aten, or at least we think it's crashed. It really looks like we've lost KB. Fern and Wim and everyone are crushed as that's happened, and now they realize there's only one thing left. The barrier needs to go. The button needs to be pressed. The lever needs to be pulled. And so now they have to somehow get past Jod to pull the lever. And this is where we get 3 lines of exposition that tell a complete story. As Jod shares about his childhood, his upbringing, his backstory, as he's holding the lightsaber to Wim's dad's throat because Wim is about to destroy the barrier.
No one's coming to save you, boy! Grow up! That's not...
When I was your age, all I cared about was not starving. I was living in a hole in the ground, and a Jedi found me. She may have been desperate and ragged like me, but she told me I had potential. And that was... well... she only taught me a little before they hunted her down. And they made me watch whilst they killed her.
And so as we guess, there is some force training that's happened for Jod. He was found by a Jedi, the only person in the galaxy that actually cared for him. You could see who actually saw potential in him. Everyone else has just cast him aside as nothing but garbage, except this Jedi who was killed by the Inquisitors for being a survivor of Order 66. And that sent Jod into hiding, why he hasn't used his force powers as much, but he was able to learn some things. As that's all going down, Wim runs back to his dad to hug his dad, and his dad, again, still emboldened. I really love that the parents stepped up here and kind of had their own little mini story arc of redemption, as now they're going to go into action and save the world. Wim's dad gets up and with a hard right hook, smacks Jod right in the face, dropping the lightsaber. And now there's a mad scramble to try and hit the switch, the lever to allow the barrier to be destroyed. After a bunch of kind of back and forth pushing, finally it's Fern's mom who also agrees. Not just the dad, the mom as well. And she pulls the lever, destroying the barrier. And for the first time, the world of Ad-Atten gets to look up and see the stars, the beauty of the galaxy, and the danger that lies on the other side of that barrier. And then it's the X-Wings to the rescue. We got X-Wings, my favorite, B-Wings, and even a CR-90 Corvette that we eventually see popping through. But the X-Wings and B-Wings take down the frigate. They take out the pirates. The pirates retreat to their ship and crash. And as that's happening, we get this scene that actually kind of reminded me a little bit of Fight Club. I don't know, as they're standing there and you can see the city exploding. It kind of felt the same way. Jod is standing there looking out at his plan completely falling to rubble. And he has this smirk, this smile on his face, almost as if acknowledging that the kids have done a good job. But I think it's there for a different reason. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And as all that's happening, the kids rush to go see about KB and the crashed Onyx Cinder. They get there running past all this gold on the ground because the gold doesn't matter. They only really care about their friend. None of it matters. I think it was a beautiful picture of, even amidst all of this treasure, the most important thing in life is the people that you care about, the loved ones you have. You can always get more money. You can't replace those friendships. And so they run to see if KB is still okay, and she is. She's fine. They pull them out from under the ship, and there's a cool, funny little line that Fern looks to Wim and says, hey, now you don't have to worry about assessment, because KB had crashed into the building where they would take the test. But I think it's also a bigger line about how, like, the great work is shifting. Everything is different. The world we know as it is gone. It will never be the same again. And now you can do something different. And in that moment, he looks up and sees the X-Wings, almost like foreshadowing that Wim is going to get in an X-Wing and fly one day. And wouldn't that be interesting? I'd be on board for an X-Wing squadron, Rogue Squadron type show centered around an adult Wim. I mean, that's kind of where I hope they do. If they're going to go for other things later, is to jump further ahead into the timeline with these kids much older and maybe doing different things, but kind of like the future. What is that at now? Tell that story, and maybe they have to fend off from others who want to take the treasure. I don't know. I'm not a writer, but I just think that might be interesting. And then that's the show. Again, I really thoroughly enjoyed this show. I was really bummed at this episode that we didn't get many of our answers. We didn't really get a whole lot more about Ad-Atten. Yes, we got the backstory of Jod. Yes, we saw the supervisor, but it didn't really feel like a surprise. It was a good ending. I won't say great, because I think they could have done some things just even a little bit better. It is left a little bit open-ended. Again, back to that smirk of Jod. I think he's got a plan. I think we saw in this episode, while he did kind of go evil, he didn't go full total corruption. He could have killed them at any moment. He could have really shot and taken apart with a lightsaber and his blaster anyone he wanted to in that supervisor's tower, but he didn't. He was patient. He was just trying to be like, I don't want to hurt anybody. And I really believe that that was the truth.
I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to damage this wonderful planet. I want you can all go back to work.
I really believe that when KB was flying away, he didn't want to go after her. I really believe he didn't want to kill Wim's dad, but he had to pretend like he did to get the kids to do what he needed. And overall, I thought this show was great. There was something, though, that really surprised me about this episode. I didn't really mention it here because I thought it needed its own video, and it surprised me about this last episode as looking back on the show. And if you want to see that video, click right here. Guys, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I'll see you on the video. Remember, the Force will be with you always.